Hey guys, welcome back to my channel and thank you so much for watching. In today's video, I'm going to be showing you how I made this octopus steampunk themed cake. Before we get into it, don't forget to subscribe for new videos every week and give it a thumbs up if you enjoy it. That being said, let's get started. I already have my extra tall 6-inch cake iced and covered in fondant, and if you need to see how to get to this step, I will link that video down below. With my fondant tool, I'm adding in some lines to my cake. I'm using my cue card here just to keep me nice and straight. You can use a ruler or whatever you have. And I'm just doing boxes, rectangles, all different sizes. I just want like a grid pattern, but it doesn't really matter how big or small you make them. Once the whole thing was covered, I went over the lines one more time just to deepen them, and then I'm going to be painting my cake. Y'all know I love a good stipple, so I'm going to be stippling on some brown food coloring gel that I mixed with a little bit of food grade alcohol, just doing a nice base coat over the whole cake. I let that first layer dry, and then I went back in with a little bit more of a concentrated brown and did the whole thing one more time. I chose this route because it gives you a really nice texture. You could just cover your cake with brown fondant and go from there. But you'll see, once I add some shimmer to this, it has like a nice metallic-y leather look, and I think it really jived with the whole theme of the cake. I took just some straight up brown food coloring and a fine tip paintbrush and got into all of those lines just to add a little more separation, and you can really see each panel pop out. To give it a little more texture, I went in with my pointy fondant tool and just added in these dots all along the border of each panel. You could just leave it here with brown for like more of a leathered look, but I wanted it to have a metal vibe just because that's like a really prominent thing with the whole steampunk theme. So I took a little bit of gold luster dust and I'm just brushing that lightly over the brown with my fluffy brush. I don't want each panel to be solid gold. I still want that texture and the brown underneath to come through. Moving on to my favorite element of this cake, I'm going to start making my octopus. I'm using modeling chocolate for this just because it blends nice and easy, but you could use fondant if you like to and just add a little bit of Tylose powder to it. For the head, I have this fat teardrop shape, and then I'm just adding like a flat blob of my modeling chocolate right below that. I'm working on top of a piece of parchment paper just so it doesn't stick to my work surface. Before I go any further, I'm adding in 2 skewers into the bottom, making sure they're really stuck in there. I wish I had longer skewers for this. The longer the better, so they can go really deep down into the cake. I ended up having to add another skewer later on, so learn from my mess up. I rolled out these long snakies, trying to keep them all the same width and size, and they were tapered at the ends. And you can see I'm just going to start adding them kind of haphazardly, coiling some around. There really is no wrong way to do this. And then I'm trying to blend the base into the body. I went in with my soft fondant tool and just redefined the legs a little bit, and if I thought any of them were a little bit too flat, I just added another piece of that modeling chocolate on top and then blended it in. You want to make sure that your tentacles are rounded. You don't want to have like any flat, weird edges because that's just not the way octopuses are. So this is what he looked like. And to add a little bit of texture, I have this piece of like sticky, grippy mat you can get at the dollar store, and I'm just pressing that lightly into the whole thing. I'm adding the same grid-like pattern into the head and then using a really tiny piping tip, just marking in the little bolts. For the goggles, I used yellow and gray fondant, and I just built them basically out of my circle cutters and piping tips, just cutting out some rings and adding little pieces to the center and the sides. No rhyme or reason, just made it up as I went along, trying to make it look like mechanically and steampunkish. For the center of the goggles and the top of the head, I added some little gears. I used a mold for this, which I will have linked down below, and you're going to see me use it a little later on in the video. With that same dark gray modeling chocolate, I'm adding on some suckers. So just flattening on these little circles. I didn't do it for every single tentacle. I just did it for a couple of the ones that would have had like the bottoms exposed, because otherwise it would have been a crazy amount of work. This did take me quite a while. And then using my fondant tools, I'm just indenting the center of each one. To make my octopus pop, I brushed the whole thing with a little bit of gold, very similar to the way I did the body of the cake. I don't want to completely block out that base dark color. It just makes it look a lot more grungy and like an old piece of like brass, I guess. For the goggles and the gear on the head, I used gold and silver that I mixed with a little bit of food grade alcohol, and I'm just painting over each piece. This is him done. I let him dry overnight, and because it was modeling chocolate, it set quite hard. If you use fondant, you want to add that tylose. Otherwise, the tentacles are not going to stay up when you go to add them to the cake. You want to make sure that the whole thing is completely set. So these are the 3 molds I used for this cake. Again, I'm going to have them all linked down below. And for each one, I first dusted it with a little bit of cornstarch, really making sure to get into all the nooks and crannies. And then I used gray, yellow, and that same dark color, and just made a bunch of the different gears. And then I did the clock with that dark color as well. I put the molds in my freezer until they were really firm, and then just turned them out onto my counter, and because we dusted with that cornstarch, they should release pretty easily. I painted all of my yellow and gray pieces silver and gold, and then I dry dusted over the darker ones with this coppery color. To make the portholes, I cut out a circle of that dark bottling chocolate, and then just with one size smaller, just punch the center out of that. I cut out one more circle, and then with my X-Acto knife, I just marked in a grid, and then very carefully cut out each of those little inner pieces. Mine was not perfect. It looked a little bit ragtag, but I just did my best. I used my mold to make my clock, and I just dry dusted it the exact same way I did my octopus, and I'm just adding that right in the center with a little bit of shortening. I added the outer rings of my porthole first on the top and bottom of that, and then just very gently placed my grates on top with a little bit of water. Once I was happy with how they were placed, I just dusted over the whole thing very lightly with that gold. So now I'm going to start adding my gears. There was no rhyme or reason, I just added them willy-nilly. Between a few of them, I'm taking my paintbrush and just laying down a little bit of water, and then I've rolled out a long piece of that dark modeling chocolate, and I'm just laying that down so it looks like piping, and they're going into the center of the gears. I added some texture using my X-Acto knife, and then dry brushed the pipes as well. Once I was happy with the gears placement, I took a little bit of black food coloring and just got in between the nooks and crannies behind the grate, just so it was darker than the rest of the cake. And finally, we pop the octopus into the top. You can see I've got that extra skewer in there, the longer the better. And now that it's nice and set, these tentacles are not going to move, they're going to stay firm and in place. And this was the final result, guys. I love how this cake turned out. I am super into the steampunk theme, so I'm really happy I finally got to make a cake. I hope you enjoyed this video. Don't forget to give it a thumbs up if you did, and I will see you in the next one.